911 operators of Reddit. What are some of the funniest things someone has called in for? I once called 911 because I cut my finger and wanted to talk to my mom, who was a dispatcher. I called, crying, asking to talk to her by name. She was more pissed at my dad for not waking up when I tried to go to him first. Well, I guess you are calling because of an emergency and that you need to talk to somebody in that case of the emergency, so I don't see anything wrong here. Numerous calls where someone has handcuffed themselves to a significant other during coitus and lost the key. If it's not busy, this seems to draw most available officers. And not me, but a coworker. A person was pleasuring themselves with the handle of the scissors, and it got stuck. Yeah, I feel like calling the police is probably the very last resort when you're in the middle of something like that. I was a 911 operator before becoming a paramedic. I had a lot of funny ones, but by far my favorite involved an all too common problem of a kid getting a hold of a locked cell phone and only being able to dial 911. It was Father's Day, mind you. I had this particular kid, about 5 years old, call in at least 6 times, but he'd never stay on the line long enough for us to get a good ping on his cell phone. It was probably about 2200 local at the time. Not early, but not too late in the night. Long story short, we were finally able to get him to stay on the phone long enough by talking about how his teddy bear was sick. We asked to speak to his parents, and he told us they were in bed and the door was locked. So we asked him to go knock on the door. He then told us he'd been locked in his room. Okay, I think we know what's going on now. By this point, we had an officer en route to the kid's house to go make sure everything was okay, and to tell the parents their kid has been calling 911. The officer arrives on scene, a few minutes go by, then the officer comes over the radio and says, S-120 back in service, the teddy bear is 10-4. The officer made his way up to the comm center and proceeded to tell us that the kid's dad answered the door wearing only boxer shorts, and was more than a little agitated when he found out his son had been calling 911. Apparently the dad had been getting his Father's Day gift from Mom when the officer showed up. And so you thought that the best thing to do with your kid at the time was to lock him in his room with a cell phone with, I'm guessing, no service? I had a grown man calling in about a monster trying to get into his son's room. He's the right kind of frantic where I know it's not a mental health crisis, but I still couldn't figure it out. Well, he's a Middle Eastern male with a really thick accent, and I was having a hard time understanding. So he gave the phone to his son. The monster had climbed a tree and was at his bedroom window, and it was as big as his dog, and it has hands like him, but tiny. Wait, what? Right there I told the kid to see if it had rings on his tail. Yes, they had just moved to America a month ago, and they had never heard of raccoons. I couldn't mute myself fast enough, and the father heard me laughing. I think that's what calmed him down. I explained what a trash panda was and welcomed him to our jungle. You guys ever, called the police because there was a raccoon outside your house? A little kid called 911 because he wanted the cops to come arrest his brother. You see, their mom said that the caller's brother was supposed to share their Legos, but he wasn't sharing. The caller's brother said that he was playing with all of the Legos, which wasn't possible. There were too many for one person to play with all of them at once, argued our caller. Therefore, his brother was a liar, a jerk, and a turd, and we needed to come arrest him. We had a high degree of confidence that this wasn't a coded request for help, so we asked to speak to an adult, confirm that there was no distress, and close the case. Share your Legos, kids. P.S. If your kid ever calls 911, don't get mad at them. We want them to call 911 if they think they should. We would much rather have them call 911 for something silly than have them not call when they should because they're afraid of getting in trouble. You know, if this little demon could call 911, she'd be calling every time she got hungry. A man required extrication from an Under Armour insulated shirt. His shoulder popped out of the socket while he was putting it on. It was halfway on, halfway off, and his arm was locked and dislocated. Man, who knew that putting on clothes was such a difficult job if you're not flexible? I was a 911 dispatcher years ago, but had 2 specific calls that still make me laugh. One was a frazzled mother that called because her 6-year-old had gotten onto the roof and she couldn't get him down. She kept screaming about how we needed to hurry, not because she was worried he would get hurt, but because he had done this before and the last time he peed in the air vents. And 2, this was before weed was legal in my state, but a college kid called asking for an ambulance. He was super worried that he was having an allergic reaction to the weed he just smoked. We asked about his symptoms and he said, "I just can't stop eating Cheetos." How in the world does anyone think that that's an allergic reaction? My dad used to be in charge of the 911 call center. One particular story I remember was in like '09, some guy called asking how much weed he could have in his car while driving through the state. They were back and forth maybe 20 minutes of the guy repeating and rephrasing the question, and my dad just responding, "None." Okay, it looks like maybe you're gonna have to drive around the state. I briefly worked as a 911 operator. When someone called on the non-emergency line, we always answered the same way. "Blank police and fire, this is a recorded line, how can I help you?" I answer as usual, and a very inebriated sounding woman asks the following. Hypothetically speaking, if my boyfriend had a few grams of cocaine and I called the police to tell them about it, would either of us get in any trouble? Ma'am, you're calling the police on a recorded line. I know, but what does the law say? I don't know, ma'am. I'm not a police officer. Would you like me to send one? Yes, please. She gives me her address. An officer responded, but there were no arrests. That one had me scratching my head. Yeah, I'm sure police always fall for that, hypothetically type stories. Not me, but my wife, who works both as a secretary for a fire department and as a volunteer firefighter. A lady calls asking if she can donate a building for a training burn-in. After asking questions, she finds out that it's not a building, but an RV. More questions. It's not her RV. It was abandoned on her property. Just a few more questions. It's not exactly abandoned. It's her ex-husband's RV, and he's living in it and won't leave. She wants my wife's fire department to burn it down. The fire department declined. Out of all of the ways to get somebody killed, I've never really thought of this one before. Actual 911 operator here. So far the silliest was a guy who called, all concerned about the number of birds flying around because there was an air show nearby and he was worried the planes would hit the birds. I think some people are just busybodies and they just, they want to feel important, like, oh, maybe I should get involved in this thing. A guy calls my agency every so often to talk about murdering gummy bear dinosaurs and something about strawberry tampons. I guess he's just looking for somebody to share his ideas with, and he wants to know if it's a good business decision. I'm not a dispatcher, but when I was a child and like 6, I called the police from the home phone and asked if they could come play with me because I didn't have friends. So they showed up, because they have to respond, and I got a lecture from the police and my military parents about the seriousness of calling 911. Well, when you've got nobody to talk to and none of your friends and family answer their phone, at least you always have 911 to talk to. I just certified as a call taker and got mandated for overtime on my first shift. The policy was if someone insisted they saw something, we take it as face value and enter the call. Well, this lady called me just after midnight and swore she saw a chupacabra on the west side of Orlando and insisted that an officer do an area check. Not too long after that, a coworker was in on his night off and left the building. He called 2 minutes later saying he saw a kangaroo hopping down the street. I can't make this stuff up. Wow, so either that chupacabra turned into a kangaroo, or kangaroos live in more places than just Australia. A lady called in because she thought Willie Nilsson was having a cardiac arrest in her trailer, and she needed an ambulance. I started giving her CPR instructions, and come to find out when paramedics got there, she was doing compressions on the couch cushions. Okay, I have no idea what's going on here. I had a guy call in on 911 because he was concerned about a seagull he thought was injured in a Chipotle restaurant parking lot. Apparently while on the phone, he tried to pick up or check on the bird, at which point the bird started squawking. Then he started freaking out, and I started having trouble telling them apart. Then there I could hear what might have been wings flapping. A brief silence, and suddenly the guy started hyperventilating and screaming he needed an ambulance, because he was having a heart attack, and that the bird flew off. I wasn't sure if he was being serious, so I got him over to EMS as a precaution. Upon transfer and getting EMS on the line, he got very quiet and said, "I think I'm okay. I'll call you back later," and hung up and would not answer on callback. I still wonder about Steven Seagal when I drive by a Chipotle. Man, this poor guy got into a fight with an injured seagull and lost. Not a 911 operator, but during residency they had a shadow one during my EMS month. This woman called 911 3 times in 10 minutes for a service animal in a mall. "He's here staring at me. No, I don't care that he's helping. He's just licked his nuts." It kind of seems like a lot of people just see 911 as the default hotline for any kind of complaints. A guy called in because his dog had bitten a seagull and was now acting strange. He demanded we find the bird, capture it, and test it for rabies. The whole circumstances were vague, and he was unwilling to listen to reasonable advice, like that birds can't carry rabies. He had the audacity to file a complaint when informed we would not be doing what he wanted. Well, how are you supposed to find a very specific bird that's probably flying around surrounded by millions of other birds? A friend had cops called on him because he was doing liquid at the train station. It's a form of dancing at raves where your hands seem to look like liquid. The person who called the cops was scared it was satanic or something. I mean, even if you were just out in the public and you saw somebody doing some weird ritual on the sidewalk, like, is that really concerned to be, like, bringing in cops for? There are funny calls that come in all the time. I talked to a pizza delivery guy who couldn't reach his destination because a defiant chicken was standing in the middle of the road. I stayed with him on the phone as he pleaded with it to finally move along. Truly a chicken crossing the road moment. Another time I took a call where a guy insisted he was in an argument with a man dressed as a giant Pepsi bottle. He said the man in the Pepsi suit had stolen his debit card and refused to give it back. Upon arrival, the officers told me he was super high and arguing with the vending machine. You know, maybe the reason that cops love arresting stoners is because they're just so tired of getting stupid calls from them. Somebody called because they got their head stuck in a cat tree, with the cat stuck inside with it. Throughout the call, I kept hearing like, ow, F, and dude, this isn't fun for me either. Dude, I know, F, ow, dude. The caller ended up going to the hospital for a minor case of serious head lacerations. Okay, I don't really know the severity, but I'm sure they got some stitches. The other cool thing was that the caller was using an Apple Watch to call 911, because obviously he wouldn't be able to hold the phone to his ear anyway. We get about a dozen missed dials from Apple Watches a day. It was nice to finally see one being used for real. Oh man, that sounds like a fun incident with a cat though. Good thing there's no spot that I could really get my head stuck on this one. Not an operator, but I heard a call once where a woman called 911 because there was a baby lizard in her computer. Wait, was he just there to try and sell you car insurance? I called 911 today to report a bushfire near downtown Seattle. Here's the call in its entirety. Ring. A tired-sounding dispatcher says, 911, are you calling to report the bushfire on I-5 by the 520 bridge exit? I say, yes. He says, we got it, and hangs up. I was kind of impressed, to be honest. I was on a mobile phone, but he had to have had a general pin on my location. Yeah, anytime I see a wildfire, there's always like those highway signs that are like, we are aware of the fire, please do not dial 911. Not me, but my dad. He gets a call from an old lady saying she can't find her husband's gun. He asks, where did you see it last? And she goes, well, I wanted to hide it from my husband, so I put it in the toaster. And then I donated the toaster to a thrift store. So, ma'am, you put the gun in the toaster, then donated said toaster to a store? Yes, I did. Well, ma'am, I can't help you with that. The toaster of doom, we like to call it. Well, that thrift store probably got a little surprise. When I worked at a local domestic violence line, someone called in to report that they had ordered a dozen donuts and there was only 11, and the store wouldn't give them another one the next day, and their husband is taking it out yelling at the kids. But she didn't want us to talk to her husband, but insisted if she could get one donut out of the place, he would calm down. She had been in and out of the woman's shelter, so we knew he was a bad person. Well, he got arrested and wasn't supposed to be there, because of a restraining order, and she called us back and was yelling, she just wanted one donut, not to see him arrested. Oh, well, that was a bit of a chaotic series of stories. To be honest, I don't think I've ever dialed 911 in my life. Back when I worked security, I did call the non-emergency line a few times, but that was about it. So let me know if you guys have any stories of your own, and I guess tomorrow looks like it's going to be more stupidest things people have ever said. So I'll talk to you later.